I wasn't looking for another woman. That's the first thing you should know. The very idea was a door I had nailed shut, boarded over, and then bricked up for good measure. My last attempt at loving a woman, a chaotic and brilliant artist named Sarah, had ended by immolating my life, leaving me standing in the emotional rubble with nothing but the lingering smell of smoke and regret. So, I built a new life, a smaller, safer one. It had four walls: my tiny apartment, my freelance writing work, the grocery store, and the gym. The gym was the most important wall. It was my penance and my sanctuary, a place of clean, simple transactions. You lift the weight, it feels heavy. You put it down. There was no subtext, no hidden meaning, no way for the cold, unyielding iron to lie to you and tell you it loved you before disappearing with your favorite sweatshirt and half your record collection. The air in Iron Haven was a thick cocktail of sweat, rubber, and the sharp metallic tang of chalk. It was an aggressively masculine space, all grunts and clanging plates, which suited me just fine. I could be anonymous here, just another body working through its own private exorcism. My routine was a liturgy of pain. Leg day until my quads screamed, arms until I couldn't lift my water bottle, cardio until my lungs burned with the righteous fire of exhaustion. I was chasing a state of blankness, a physical fatigue so profound it would crowd out the ghosts. For 3 months, it worked. I existed between sets, my world shrinking to the 60 seconds of rest, the burn in my muscles, the rhythm of my own breathing. I saw no one. I spoke to no one. Then I saw her. She was in the corner of the free weight area, a space I usually avoided, a place where the testosterone seemed to congeal in the air. But my usual squat rack was taken, and I found myself migrating into her orbit. She was solid. That was the first word that came to mind. Not in a bulky way, but in a way that suggested she was rooted to the very core of the earth. She was a tall black woman with intricate braids pulled back from a face that was all elegant lines and fierce concentration. She was loading a barbell for deadlifts with a quiet efficiency that was mesmerizing. There was no wasted motion, no performative grunt, just the smooth slide of the plates, the secure click of the collars. Her arms were a beautiful roadmap of muscle and sinew, and as she chalked her hands, the white powder stark against her dark skin, I felt a familiar, unwelcome flutter in my chest. It was a moth I thought I'd starved to death, now beating its dusty wings against my ribs. I immediately turned away, grabbing a lighter kettlebell than I normally would and retreating to the furthest, darkest corner of the room. I wasn't looking for another woman, especially not one who looked like she could effortlessly deadlift the entire weight of my accumulated baggage. For the next 2 weeks, avoiding her became a secondary workout, a kind of psychological agility training. If she was by the cable machines, I was suddenly fascinated by the rowing machines on the other side of the gym. If she was on the main floor stretching, I would decide it was the perfect time to go upstairs and punish myself on the Stairmaster. It was ridiculous. I was a grown woman acting like a skittish teenager. My internal monologue was a constant looping argument. She's just a person at the gym. It means nothing. You're projecting, you're lonely. Stop it. But my eyes had other ideas. They would find her against my will, tracking her progress across the room, noting the focused set of her jaw as she pushed through a difficult set, the small, almost imperceptible nod she gave herself in the mirror when she finished. She had a presence that was both powerful and serene. The other gym goers, the big guys who strutted and postured, seemed to give her a wide berth, born not of intimidation, but of respect. She moved with an unhurried grace that seemed at odds with the sheer amount of weight she was lifting. I learned her schedule: Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Early evenings, just like me. My safe space was no longer safe. It was now charged with a low-grade current of awareness that hummed just beneath the surface of the gym's usual noise. The inevitable, mortifying interaction happened on a Wednesday. The gym was more crowded than usual, a post-work rush of bodies all vying for the same limited equipment. I needed a set of 25-pound dumbbells for shoulder presses, and there was only one pair left on the rack. As I reached for them, another hand, long-fingered and strong, closed around the one next to it. I froze. It was her. "Oh, sorry," I mumbled, snatching my hand back as if the dumbbell were hot. My face flushed. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. Her eyes were a deep, warm brown, and for a second I forgot how to breathe. "My bad," she said. Her voice was even lower and smoother than I had imagined, like honey mixed with gravel. It vibrated in the air between us. "You can take them? I can wait." "No, it's fine, you were here first," I insisted, my voice coming out an octave too high. I sounded like a panicked bird. A tiny smile touched the corner of her mouth. It wasn't a smirk, it was amused, gentle. "We could share," she suggested, her tone practical. "If you're doing a few sets." Sharing. The word hung in the air. Sharing meant proximity. It meant talking. It meant acknowledging her existence for more than 3 seconds. It was everything I was trying to avoid. But refusing would be even more awkward. It would be a declaration. "I am a weirdo who cannot function in your presence." "Okay," I managed to squeak out. So we shared. We performed a clumsy dance of retrieving and replacing the weights, our hands brushing once, sending a jolt up my arm that was entirely disproportionate to the contact. I tried to focus on my form in the mirror, but my reflection was a fraud, a thin veneer of composure over a churning sea of anxiety. All I could see was her in the periphery, the way her shoulders flexed under her tank top, the controlled explosion of her movement as she pressed the weight overhead. The scent of her, which I was now close enough to register, wasn't perfume. It was something clean and subtle, like citrus and fresh laundry, a scent that spoke of care and discipline. It was the opposite of Sarah, who always smelled of turpentine, clove cigarettes, and expensive, complicated perfume. "You're Maya, right?" she said between sets, wiping her brow with the back of her wrist. My heart hammered against my ribs. She knew my name. How did she know my name? Had I said it? Did I have it tattooed on my forehead? I must have looked as bewildered as I felt, because she clarified, "I've seen you checking in. I'm Lena." She offered her name so easily, as if it were a simple fact and not, to my scrambled brain, a revelation. Lena. It suited her. It was a name that felt as strong and grounded as she was. "Yeah, Maya," I confirmed, my voice still shaky. "Nice to meet you." "You too," she said, giving me that small, quiet smile again before turning back to the rack. The rest of my workout was a wash. My focus was shot. I kept replaying the 10-minute interaction in my head, dissecting every word, every glance. She knew my name. She had been aware of me, just as I had been of her. The thought was both terrifying and thrilling. The wall I had so carefully constructed around myself suddenly felt flimsy, transparent, and I knew with a sinking feeling of inevitability that my simple monastic gym existence was over. My attempts to re-establish my anonymity were a complete failure. Now that we had spoken, a silent acknowledgement was required. It started with a nod when we passed each other. Then the nod evolved into a quiet, "Hey." Soon it became impossible to pretend our parallel schedules were a coincidence. We were the constants of each other's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evenings. The gym, once a vast space, began to feel like a small room. My awareness of her was a magnetic pull, a force I could no longer ignore. I gave up on avoidance and leaned into observation, reframing it in my mind as a character study. I was a writer, after all. This was research. I learned that Lena was a creature of profound habit and discipline. She arrived at 6:05 p.m. every time. She started with a dynamic warm-up that was almost a dance, a fluid series of movements that looked both effortless and incredibly complex. Then she would approach the barbell with a reverence I found captivating. Before every heavy lift, she would close her eyes for a moment, her long lashes resting on her high cheekbones. It was a moment of stillness, of gathering. Then her eyes would open, and it was as if a switch had been flipped. Pure focus, pure power. I noticed the small things, the details that painted a picture of the woman beyond the weights. She wore worn leather lifting gloves, the palms scuffed and softened with use. She had a small silver compass tattooed on the inside of her left wrist, the needle pointing north. I wondered what it represented, what direction she was committed to. She drank water from a battered metal flask, covered in stickers from national parks: Zion, Acadia, Yosemite. So, she traveled, she hiked, she existed in the world outside these four walls, a world I had shrunk from. She was also kind. I saw her pause her own workout to show a nervous-looking teenager the correct form for a squat, her voice patient and encouraging. I saw her re-rack weights someone else had left behind, not with a sigh of annoyance, but with a simple, matter-of-fact tidiness. She smiled at the elderly woman who worked the front desk, asking about her grandkids by name. This quiet, unassuming decency was more intimidating to me than her physical strength. Sarah had been dazzling, a firework of a woman who demanded all the attention in the room, but her kindness was conditional, transactional. Lena's seemed to be an inherent part of her, as natural as her breathing. I started to resent her for it. I resented her for her calm, for her strength, for her gentle intrusion into my carefully curated misery. Each nod, each quiet, "Hey," felt like a small chip in my armor. I felt exposed, seen, in a way I hadn't allowed myself to be in a year. The worst part was the insidious way she was seeping into my work. I was supposed to be writing sterile, technical copy for a software company, but I found myself describing algorithms with the language of muscle and sinew. I wrote about user interfaces having a quiet, intuitive strength. I described a loading bar as a moment of focused stillness before execution. She was everywhere. One Monday, I came into the gym feeling particularly raw. The weekend had been a minefield of memories. A song on the radio, the smell of rain on hot asphalt, a particular slant of afternoon light. Everything had conspired to remind me of Sarah. The grief, which I usually managed to keep at a low simmer, had boiled over. I felt brittle, angry, and desperately sad. I channeled it all into the workout. I loaded the leg press with more weight than I should have, my movements jerky and aggressive. I was punishing my body for the failures of my heart. I was on my third set, pushing with everything I had, when my focus wavered. A flash of memory. Sarah laughing in my kitchen, her head thrown back, paint streaked across her cheek. My breath hitched. My form, which was already compromised, completely fell apart. My lower back arched dangerously, and a sharp, searing pain shot from my spine down to my hip. I gasped, releasing the weight with a loud clang. I sat there, hunched over on the machine, breathing hard. Tears of pain and frustration pricked at my eyes. It was the ultimate humiliation. To not only feel broken on the inside, but to have my body physically betray me as well. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to be invisible. "You okay?" The voice was low and close. Lena. Of course it was Lena. She was standing beside the machine, her expression a mixture of concern and practiced calm. There was no judgment in her eyes, only a quiet assessment of the situation. "I'm fine," I snapped, my voice harsher than I intended. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. I tried to stand up to prove it, but the pain in my back flared, and I sank back onto the seat with a wince. She didn't argue or coddle me. She just waited a beat, giving me space. "That looked like it hurt," she said simply. "Your form collapsed on that last rep. You arched your back." I couldn't even look at her. I just stared at the scuffed floor, my own pathetic reflection staring back at me from a puddle of someone's spilled water. Yeah, well, I noticed. Another moment of silence. I expected her to walk away, to leave me to my self-pity. Instead, she knelt, bringing herself to my eye level. The movement was so unexpected, so disarming, that I finally looked at her. Mind if I show you a stretch for that? She asked, her voice soft. It'll help release the pressure in your lower back. I get it sometimes when I go too heavy on my squats without a good warm-up. She was offering a solution, not a lecture. She was including herself in the mistake, creating a tiny bridge of shared experience. I was so tired of being an island. My anger and defensiveness crumbled, leaving behind only the raw, aching hurt. I gave a weak, defeated nod. Okay, she said, her voice gentle. Come on, let's go over to the mats. She helped me up, her hand hovering near my elbow without actually touching me, a gesture of support that respected my boundaries. I limped after her to the stretching area, feeling like a fool. She had me lie on my back and gently guided me through a series of stretches, her instructions clear and concise. Bring your right knee to your chest. Good. Now breathe into it. Try to relax your hip. Her touch, when it came, was professional and sure. She placed a hand on my knee to provide gentle resistance, and another on my hip to keep it grounded. Her skin was warm, her grip firm. The stretch sent a wave of relief through my screaming muscles, but it was replaced by a different kind of tension, a coiling awareness in my stomach. I was acutely conscious of her proximity, of the scent of citrus and clean sweat, of the focused intensity in her dark eyes. Just a rough week, I heard myself say. The words were quiet, a surrender. It was the most vulnerable thing I had admitted to another human being in a year. Lena didn't press for details. She just held the stretch for a moment longer, her hand a steady, warm pressure on my knee. I hear that, she said, her voice a low murmur. The iron helps, but sometimes it's just heavy. In that moment, she wasn't just talking about the weights, and we both knew it. That small moment of caretaking irrevocably altered the landscape between us. The gym was no longer a place of silent observation and awkward avoidance. It had become a space of quiet connection. The next time I saw her, I didn't just nod. I sought her out. She was on the treadmill, a light sheen of sweat on her forehead, her braids swinging in time with her steady pace. I took the machine next to hers. Hey, I said, my voice feeling clumsy in the rhythmic thud of our feet on the belts. My back feels a lot better today. So, thanks for that. She turned her head, a genuine smile reaching her eyes. It transformed her face, softening the focused intensity into something warm and open. Good, I'm glad. Just take it easy for a couple of days. Don't try to be a hero. Noted, I said, returning the smile. It felt rusty, like a piece of machinery I hadn't used in a long time. We ran in comfortable silence for a few minutes before she spoke again. What do you listen to when you run? Podcasts, mostly, I admitted. True crime, it's a great motivator. Nothing makes you run faster than a detailed description of someone being chased through the woods. She let out a low chuckle. It was a rich, pleasant sound. Damn, that's dark. I'm more of a 90s R&B person myself. Respectable, I said. Can't go wrong with the classics. The conversation was light, easy. We talked about music, about the pros and cons of different running shoes, about the weird guy who always shadowboxed in the mirror between sets. It was mundane, but it felt monumental. It felt normal. And I realized how desperately I had missed feeling normal with someone. Over the next few weeks, these small conversations became our ritual. We would naturally gravitate toward each other, our workouts overlapping. I learned that she was a structural engineer, a job that seemed perfectly suited to her personality. All about foundations, stress loads, and integrity. She was training for a local powerlifting competition, her first one. "Aren't you nervous?" I asked one evening as she was methodically adding plates to her barbell. She paused, wiping her chalky hands on her shorts. "Terrified," she admitted, and the confession hung in the air, a surprising and humanizing vulnerability. "It's one thing to lift in here, where nobody's really watching. It's different when it's 3 judges in a room full of people. What if I get up there and just fail?" "You won't," I said, the words coming out with more certainty than I felt about anything in my own life. "I've seen you. You're the most focused person in this entire place." She looked at me, a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher in her eyes. "Thanks, Maya." I felt bold enough to share a piece of my own fragile reality. "I get it, though. The fear of failing in front of people." I gestured vaguely. "I'm a writer." Or I was. I'm sort of between projects right now. Between projects was the kindest possible euphemism for the crippling writer's block that had descended after Sarah left. My creativity had packed its bags and left with her, leaving behind a silent, tauntingly blank laptop screen. Lena didn't offer platitudes or easy solutions. She just nodded slowly, her gaze thoughtful. "What did you write?" "A novel," I said, the words feeling like they belonged to a different person. "It got published a couple of years ago." Her eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise. "Seriously? That's amazing. What's it called?" I told her the title, and she pulled out her phone right there, tapping it into a search bar. A moment later, she looked up, a slow, impressed smile spreading across her face. "Wow, the reviews are incredible." She read a line from one of them aloud, her voice giving the critics' words a weight and sincerity they hadn't had on the page. Hearing my own success described in her voice was deeply unsettling and strangely affirming. I had tried so hard to forget that version of myself, the one who could create worlds, the one who had hopes and ambitions before they were all tangled up with Sarah. "That was a long time ago," I mumbled, looking away. "2 years isn't a long time," Lena said gently. "Talent like that doesn't just disappear." Her belief in me, a near stranger, was a small, warm ember in the cold, dead fireplace of my confidence. Our connection was no longer just about the gym. It was about her seeing a strength in me that I thought had been extinguished forever. And I was starting to see the woman in her beyond the weights, the woman who was nervous and driven, disciplined and kind. The wall was crumbling, brick by brick, and I was doing nothing to stop it. In fact, a secret, treacherous part of me was handing her the hammer. The shift happened on a Friday night. The gym was quiet, winding down for the weekend. We had finished our respective workouts and were doing our cool-down stretches on adjacent mats. The air was thick with a comfortable post-exercise fatigue. I was struggling with my hamstrings as usual. They were stubbornly tight, a physical manifestation of my own emotional inflexibility. "You're rounding your back when you do that," Lena's voice observed from beside me. I sighed, collapsing out of the stretch. "I know, my hamstrings are basically concrete. I've accepted it." "There's a partner stretch that's really good for that," she said, her tone casual, but I could feel the weight of the offer. This was different from the impromptu first aid she'd administered for my back. This was a deliberate suggestion, an invitation into a more intimate space. My heart did a nervous little tap dance. "Oh, yeah," I tried to match her casual tone. "Yeah, lie on your back," she instructed. I did as I was told, my t-shirt riding up slightly. I felt suddenly exposed, my senses on high alert. The gym's fluorescent lights seemed too bright. The distant clank of a weight seemed too loud. Lena moved to kneel at my feet, her presence blocking out the rest of the room. "Okay, lift your right leg straight up," she said. I raised my leg, and she took it, her hands closing around my calf. Her touch was electric. One hand was firm, grounding, while the other was gentle, guiding. The calluses on her palms were a rough, pleasant friction against my skin. It was the most contact we'd ever had, and my body responded instantly, a low hum of awareness starting deep in my belly. "Now just relax and breathe," she murmured. "I'm going to gently push it toward you. You just tell me when to stop." She began to press my leg toward my chest, slowly and steadily. The stretch was intense, pulling at the tight muscles behind my knee and up my thigh. But it was the other sensations that consumed me. The warmth of her hands seeping through my leggings, the subtle scent of her, that clean citrus and soap smell, now mingled with the honest scent of her own skin, the low, hypnotic timbre of her voice as she coached me. "Breathe into it, Maya. Don't fight the tension, just let it go." My breath hitched. She was so close, her head bent in concentration, a few loose strands of her braids brushing against her cheek. I was staring at the ceiling, but all I could see was her. All I could feel was her. The line between a helpful gym partner and something else, something terrifying and beautiful, was dissolving with every breath I took. "A little more," I whispered, my voice thick. She eased my leg further, and I squeezed my eyes shut. This was more than a stretch. This was an act of trust. I was letting her push my boundaries, literally, and I was letting her see me in a state of complete surrender. Then she shifted. "Okay, I'm going to try something else to get your lower back too." She moved, repositioning herself so she was straddling my other leg, her knee anchoring my hip. She had me bend my stretched leg and cross it over my body. To deepen the spinal twist, she leaned forward, placing one hand on my shoulder to keep it on the mat and the other on my hip, applying gentle pressure. Her body was pressed against mine. The side of her thigh was a firm, warm line against my hip. Her chest was inches from my arm. I could feel the heat radiating from her, could feel the subtle shift of her muscles as she breathed. Her face was now very close to mine, her breath a warm puff of air near my ear as she whispered, "How's that? Too much?" It was too much. It was not nearly enough. My entire nervous system lit up like a switchboard. The professional, sterile environment of the gym evaporated, and we were just two women, tangled together on a mat in the quiet corner of a nearly empty room. The air crackled. The world narrowed to this single point of contact, this shared space of breath and warmth and overwhelming proximity. I couldn't speak. I just shook my head slightly. She held the position for a beat, 2 beats, 3, a fraction of a second longer than was necessary for the stretch. It was a question hanging in the charged silence, and in that tiny, infinite pause, everything changed. When she finally pulled back, her movements were slow, deliberate. I opened my eyes. She was looking at me, her dark eyes wide and searching. I pushed myself up onto my elbows. We were still kneeling on the mat, facing each other. Neither of us looked away. And for the first time, I didn't want to. I saw it all reflected in her gaze. The same awareness, the same shock of recognition, the same terrifying, exhilarating question. The unspoken had finally been said, not in words, but in a shared silence that was louder than any confession. The turn had been made. There was no going back to just being gym partners. The aftermath was a study in exquisite tension. The gym, our former sanctuary of simple physical goals, was now a minefield of unspoken desire. Every interaction, no matter how trivial, was freighted with the memory of that moment on the mat. Sharing a water fountain felt clandestine. Asking her for a spot on the bench press became an exercise in breath control as her hands hovered inches from my body, her presence a palpable force field. We talked more than ever, but our conversations were a careful dance around the one thing that mattered. We talked about her engineering projects, my struggles with a new writing piece, the weather, the ridiculously loud music the gym insisted on playing. It was all a cover for the real conversation happening in the glances, the hesitations, the moments our fingers brushed when passing a weight. I lived for those moments. The accidental touches became the entire point of my day. Her hand on the small of my back, guiding my form. "Keep your core tight," she'd say, her voice a low vibration that traveled straight through me, and I would have to fight not to tremble. Our shoulders bumping as we stood in front of the dumbbell rack. A simple, incidental contact that left my skin tingling for an hour. I became a scholar of her micro expressions. I learned the difference between her polite gym smile and the real small smile that was just for me. I learned to read the questions in her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. My internal monologue, once a fortress of denial, was now a flood zone of yearning. What is she thinking? Does she feel this too? Am I insane? The fear was still there, a cold stone in my gut. Every time the hope felt too real, the ghost of Sarah would whisper in my ear, "Remember how this ends. Remember the crash, the fire." Sarah had loved the chase, the intensity of the beginning. But when it came to the quiet, steady work of building a life, she'd grown bored and careless, leaving me to sweep up the pieces of what she'd broken. Lena seemed to be the antithesis of that chaos. She was all about steady work, about building things with integrity. But the fear remained. What if I was the one with the faulty foundation? One evening, we were the last two people to leave. We walked out into the cool, damp air of the parking lot together. The streetlights cast long shadows, creating a bubble of intimacy around us. We stood by our cars, which were parked a few spots away from each other, neither of us making a move to leave. "Big lift today," I said, breaking the silence. I had watched her hit a new personal record on her squat. She smiled, a tired but pleased expression on her face. "Felt good. I've been chasing that number for a month." "You made it look easy." "It wasn't," she said, her gaze holding mine. "Nothing worthwhile is." The words hung between us, laden with double meaning, and almost confession. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This was the moment to say something, to breach the wall. But the fear was a physical thing, a hand closing around my throat. I just nodded, my courage failing me. "Well," I said, my voice thin, "I should get going." The light in her eyes flickered with disappointment, so subtle I might have imagined it. "Yeah, me too," she said, her voice flat. "See you Wednesday, Maya." She turned and walked to her truck without a backward glance. I watched her go, a wave of self-loathing washing over me. I was a coward. I had been given the opening, and I had sealed it shut. I got in my car and rested my forehead against the cold steering wheel, the silence of the empty vehicle amplifying the shouting in my head. The next few days were torture. I replayed that moment in the parking lot 1,000 times, rewriting the script, saying all the things I was too afraid to say. I almost didn't go to the gym on Wednesday. The thought of facing her after my spectacular failure of nerve was mortifying. But the thought of not seeing her was worse. When I walked in, the sky outside was already a bruised purple, threatening a storm. The air in the gym felt heavy, charged, mirroring my own internal state. I saw her by the squat rack, and our eyes met across the room. She gave me a small, hesitant nod. The easy warmth of the past few weeks was gone, replaced by a careful, painful distance. We worked out on opposite sides of the gym, the space between us a tangible, aching void. The storm broke halfway through my workout. It wasn't a gentle rain. It was a violent, biblical downpour. The lights in the gym flickered once, twice, as thunder rattled the windows. People started packing up, eager to get home. I finished my last set, my body feeling heavy and sluggish, my mind a chaotic mess. I trudged to my car, the rain plastering my hair to my face in seconds. I slid into the driver's seat shivering and turned the key in the ignition. Nothing, just a sad clicking sound. I tried again. Click, click, click. A pathetic metallic death rattle. Of course. It was the perfect cruel punchline to a miserable week. I slumped back in my seat, the sound of the rain hammering on the roof deafening. A sharp rap on my window made me jump. It was Lena, her face obscured by the sheets of water running down the glass. I fumbled with the handle and pushed the door open. "Car trouble?" she yelled over the roar of the storm. "It won't start," I yelled back, feeling a fresh wave of humiliation. "Pop the hood," she commanded. She was already soaked, her tank top clinging to her skin, but she seemed completely unfazed. I did as I was told, and she spent a few minutes under the hood with the flashlight from her phone before shaking her head. "Looks like the battery is completely dead. You're not going anywhere in this tonight." I closed my eyes. "Fantastic." "Come on," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "I'll give you a ride." The cab of her pickup truck was an oasis of warmth and quiet after the chaos of the storm. It smelled like her, that faint citrus scent, but also coffee and something earthy, like pine. The rain drummed a steady rhythm on the roof as she navigated the flooded streets. The silence was thick with everything we hadn't said in the parking lot 2 nights ago. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out. My sister's name flashed on the screen. I almost ignored it, but she would just keep calling. I answered. "Maya, are you okay? This storm is crazy," she said, her voice tinny through the speaker. "I'm fine, Kate. I'm getting a ride home." "Oh, good. Hey, listen, weird question, but have you heard from Sarah at all?" My blood ran cold. "No, why would I have?" "I don't know. She posted some weird, vague thing on Instagram, and I worry about you," Kate said, her voice softening into that familiar, frustrating tone of concern. "I know how you get after, well, you know. Don't go hiding away again, okay? Promise me you'll call if you need anything." "I won't. I'm fine, Kate. I have to go," I said, my voice tight. I ended the call, my hand shaking. All the progress I thought I'd made, all the strength I thought I'd been building, felt like a lie. In my sister's eyes, I was still the same fragile, broken person Sarah had left behind, perpetually one sad memory away from collapse. "You okay?" Lena asked, her voice pulling me from my spiral. She had glanced over at me, her expression concerned. And the dam broke. The carefully constructed walls, the years of repressed grief, the terror and the hope. It all came, pouring out. "No," I said, the word a raw, ragged sob. "No, I'm not. That was my sister. She's still checking on me because of my ex. It's been over a year, and my own family still treats me like I'm made of glass because of how badly she broke me. And I'm so tired of being broken. I'm tired of being scared. And I'm scared right now. I'm scared of this, of you, of the fact that for the first time in a year I feel something that isn't just numb." My confession tumbled out, messy and unscripted. "And I saw the look on your face in the parking lot the other night, and I know I messed it up. I know I was a coward, and I'm so sorry." Lena didn't say anything. She just signaled, pulled the truck over to the side of the road, and put it in park. The engine idled, the wipers slapping a frantic rhythm against the windshield. She turned in her seat to face me fully. The cab was filled with a profound, waiting silence. She reached out, her hand covering mine where it was clenched on my knee. Her touch was warm, steady, a lifeline. "You didn't mess anything up, Maya," she said, her voice low and certain. "I've been scared too, scared of pushing you, scared of reading this all wrong." She took a deep breath. "I haven't felt this way about anyone in a very long time. Seeing you at the gym, it became the best part of my day. And I'm not just talking about the gym." Tears were streaming down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of relief, of being seen. "I really like you, Maya," she said, her thumb stroking the back of my hand. "I really like you too," I whispered. And then, in the quiet intimacy of her truck, with the storm raging outside, she leaned across the center console and kissed me. It wasn't a frantic, desperate kiss. It was slow and deep and sure. It tasted of rain and relief and a profound sense of coming home. It was a kiss that didn't break me, but began to put me back together. When she pulled away, she rested her forehead against mine. "My apartment is closer," she said, her voice a soft murmur against my lips. "We can wait out the storm there." I looked into her warm, steady eyes and saw not a fire that would consume me, but a hearth that would keep me safe. "Okay," I breathed. "Yes." Waking up in Lena's bed felt like surfacing from a long, deep dive. The storm had passed, and the morning sun was filtering through the blinds, striping the room with pale, gentle light. The air was clean, washed new by the rain. I was lying on my side, and Lena was beside me, propped up on an elbow just watching me. Her hair was out of its usual braids, a soft, beautiful cloud around her face. There was no awkwardness, no morning after anxiety. There was only a profound sense of peace. "Hey," she said softly, her voice still thick with sleep. "Hey," I whispered back, a real, unforced smile spreading across my face. She reached out and tucked a stray piece of hair behind my ear, her fingers lingering for a moment on my cheek. "I was so scared," I admitted, the confession feeling safe in the quiet of the room. I thought I was too broken for anything like this." "You're not broken," Lena said, her gaze steady and unwavering. "You're strong. I've seen it every single day for months. You just forgot how to see it in yourself." She paused, her expression turning serious. "For what it's worth, I'm not going anywhere." We lay there for a long time, talking. I told her more about Sarah, about the dizzying highs and the devastating lows, about the way I had lost myself in her shadow. Lena listened, truly listened, without judgment or pity. She told me about her own last relationship, a long-distance thing that had slowly faded from lack of effort, leaving her feeling more lonely than alone. We talked about the dynamic I'd worried about, me being the fragile one and her being the strong one. She dismissed it with a soft laugh. "We all need a spotter sometimes, Maya, in the gym and out of it. It doesn't make you weak, it just makes you human." Later, after she'd made us coffee that was rich and strong, I stood in her living room while she was in the shower. It was a space that was so quintessentially her. The furniture was solid wood, functional and beautiful. The shelves were filled with books on architecture and geology, alongside novels and poetry. Photos from her hikes were framed on the wall, canyons and mountains and vast open skies. It was the home of a person who built things to last, a person who understood foundations. When she drove me back to my car in the morning, the world felt different, brighter. The mechanic confirmed my battery was dead, and as I waited for him to replace it, I sat on the curb and pulled out my phone. I scrolled to Sarah's contact. Her picture smiled back at me, a ghost from a life that no longer felt like mine. My thumb hovered over the delete button, but that didn't feel like enough. I went to her social media profiles, the ones my sister was still tracking, and I blocked her on every platform. Then I went back to her contact and hit block this caller. The action was small, digital, but it felt like a seismic shift. It wasn't an act of anger or bitterness. It was an act of closure, an act of choosing a different future. When my car was finally running, the first thing I did was send a text. Me. "My car is resurrected. Thank you for the rescue." Lena's reply was almost instantaneous. "Lena, anytime. How about we celebrate with coffee? Somewhere that doesn't smell of chalk and old sweat." A wave of pure, unadulterated happiness washed over me. It was a feeling I hadn't realized I'd been missing until it returned. Me. I would love that. I know a place. As I pulled out of the garage, I drove not toward my apartment, but toward a new direction, a new beginning. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't afraid of the journey. I was finally moving forward, and I wasn't doing it alone. The past was heavy, yes, but I was stronger than I knew, and for the first time I felt ready to lift it. When you've spent so long believing you're not strong enough for love, how do you finally trust someone who shows you that you are? If you've ever had to find that strength, let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories.